The United States has indeed invaded Venezuela. From the perspective of global geopolitical evolution, let me ask one simple question. Were my earlier analyses and predictions accurate or not? Isn't the current situation exactly what we anticipated months ago? We even discussed the timing. Trump could not afford to wait much longer. And sure enough, at the very start of 2026, Trump pulled the trigger. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, U.S. forces launched airstrikes on Caracas and multiple military targets across Venezuela. Special Operations Forces, transported by MH-47G Chinook helicopters, carried out ground assaults. According to statements made by Trump himself on social media, the operation proceeded smoothly. He claimed that U.S. forces had successfully taken control of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife and removed them from the country. Although the Venezuelan government announced a nationwide armed resistance phase and called for total mobilization after the collapse of the Maduro government, how much real resistance remains is, frankly, highly uncertain. It must be noted that, as of now, there is no independent third-party confirmation that Maduro has indeed been captured and taken abroad. But regardless of that detail, this operation clearly marks a turning point. Years of maximum pressure on Venezuela, combined with months of military preparation, have now escalated into direct military intervention. This also shows that America's so-called new Monroe Doctrine is shifting toward a combined approach: military, economic, and political, aimed at asserting broad control over Latin America. Many of you may remember that I have repeatedly analyzed this in previous articles. America's campaign against Venezuela was never an impulsive decision. It is a core component of the new Monroe Doctrine. This plan was drawn up long ago and may well date back to Trump's first term in office. So the real question is, why did Trump choose to act at the very beginning of 2026? What is the true intention of the Trump administration? And behind this so-called precision decapitation, what kind of global strategic ambitions are actually at play? First, the United States had completed military, legal, and intelligence preparations. An operation with the arrow already on the bowstring, this strike was anything but rushed. It was a highly systematic, long-planned military operation. The idea of overthrowing the Venezuelan government was already taking shape when the new Monroe Doctrine was first proposed. And the real origin of that doctrine can be traced back to the period when the United States began preparing to withdraw forces from Japan and reassess its global strategic deployment. As for concrete military preparations, starting in August 2025, the United States began massing forces in the Caribbean under the banner of counter-narcotics operations. From that moment on, the overthrow of the Venezuelan government had effectively become a predetermined option. According to Reuters, in November 2025, U.S. forces deployed with F-35 stealth fighters, MQ-9 Reaper drones, AC-130 gunships, and amphibious task force Chesto, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. That same month, the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group was moved into the Caribbean, creating the largest U.S. military presence in the region since the end of the Cold War. At the same time, Hegemonic's training activities in neighboring countries had already been ongoing for months. I had analyzed this operational logic as early as when the U.S. began its comprehensive containment of Venezuela. The United States would not launch a large-scale ground invasion. Instead, it would rely on precision strikes and special forces decapitation. And that is exactly what happened. Before the strike, the US imposed economic blockade, conducted internal subversion, and only acted once. Conditions were ripe for surgical strikes and special operations. On the legal front, the groundwork was equally thorough. In November 2025, the US Senate voted 5-1 for 9 to reject a bill restricting presidential war powers against Venezuela, effectively giving the green light for intervention. This meant the president could act without congressional authorization. More importantly, as early as September 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice initiated legal proceedings to link Maduro to the so-called Cartel of the Suns. On December 16th, Trump signed an executive order designating the Venezuelan government as a foreign terrorist organization under U.S. domestic law. This maneuver downgraded Maduro from a sovereign head of state to a legitimate military target. This kind of legal packaging is almost identical to what was done to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. The goal is simple: to bypass the UN Charter's prohibition on the use of force. Using domestic law to override international law, this has long been Washington's standard playbook. Intelligence and infiltration went even deeper. According to the Wall Street Journal, the CIA began establishing multiple covert contact points inside Venezuela as early as 2025, co-opting military officers, funding opposition groups, and sabotaging power and communications infrastructure. By January 2026, military deployment, legal justification, and intelligence penetration were all fully in place. When pressure alone failed to force Maduro out, and regime change became non-negotiable, the United States reached a point of no return. The arrow was on the string, and it had to be released. Second, as the Venezuela issue internationalized, time was running out for Trump. One fundamental reason the U.S. acted at the start of the year is that its strategic patience was wearing thin. Venezuela was accelerating diplomatic outreach, seeking to internationalize the crisis. In the second half of 2025, the Maduro government actively sought support from China, Russia, and Iran, while mobilizing left-leaning governments across Latin America. Brazil's President Lula, Mexico's President Sheinbaum, and Argentina's President Milei publicly opposed U.S. military intervention. Colombia's President Petro suspended intelligence sharing with Washington. Combined with pressure from China and Russia at the UN Security Council, the Trump administration faced mounting diplomatic strain. If this trend continued, the legitimacy of unilateral U.S. action could have collapsed entirely, potentially giving rise to a unified anti-U.S. front in Latin America. At the same time, Washington feared losing control internally. Despite severe economic hardship, Venezuela had not descended into large-scale chaos. Its 4.5 million-strong militia system remained intact. Although the CIA had co-opted some officers, it failed to generate the kind of controlled chaos needed to topple the regime. Meanwhile, Chinese, Russian, and Iranian assistance had not yet arrived at scale. But given enough time, no one could predict what might happen. And time was money. Maintaining massive deployments is costly. If delayed until the November 2026 midterm elections, Trump would face severe domestic political risks. Conservative voters oppose foreign wars, and lawmakers fear another Libya-style quagmire. Thus, before external support arrived and before internal collapse failed to materialize, a lightning decapitation strike became Washington's most cost-effective option. Third, using military dominance to shock global finance during an interest rate easing cycle. This operation coincided with a critical shift in U.S. monetary policy. In December 2025, the Federal Reserve began a new rate cut cycle. Markets widely expected that a Trump-aligned Fed chair took office. Rate cuts would accelerate in the second half of 2026 to stimulate growth and reduce debt servicing costs. In this context, Trump needed a strong geopolitical signal. The United States remains the safest asset haven in the world. Toppling a hostile government through force demonstrates overwhelming military power and creates regional instability, driving global capital back into U.S. markets. The deeper goal, however, is to reshape the economic order of the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, 300 to 0.8 billion barrels, nearly 80% in the Orinoco heavy oil belt. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, control of this region would generate enormous profits for U.S. energy firms and sever China and Russia's strategic foothold. More critically, Venezuelan opposition leaders have pledged to place the national oil company under U.S. capital management. This would allow Washington not only to extract resources, but to reinforce the dollar oil system and consolidate financial hegemony. Final summary at the start of the new year. America's invasion of Venezuela may appear to be a successful decapitation strike. In reality, it reflects a superpower struggling to sustain its global dominance. Shorter-term intimidation may work, but it cannot fix industrial hollowing, fiscal deficits, or political polarization. As Latin America awakens, as the global South turns eastward, the new Monroe Doctrine will ultimately become a historical punchline. History will prove orders built on hegemony collapse. Futures built on cooperation endure. The true trend of the world is shared consultation, shared construction, and shared prosperity.